Now, can science be used to prove the divinity of the Quran? Some Islamic scholars says no. Argument is this: they say, look, scientific theories can change, are updated, refined, even discarded. So it's a risky business. The Quran is not a book of science; it's a book of guidance. I agree, but there's context here. You know, the Quran doesn't restrict itself to a particular theory, but lays down the general principles of a concept. For example, the beginning of the universe is described in the Quran as a single unit of creation, devoid of space, closed up, constraining everything, including light. There's an opening up of creation, beginning of space and time and expansion. This describes the initial state of the universe, and most scientists believe this to be the case. Now, and this is a compelling description of the beginning of the universe. Now, the Quran does not concern itself with theories or hypotheses, but with secured, established science. For instance, it says that the earth is oval shaped. So no theory is ever going to prove that the earth is flat. Or for example, in 2133, it says each celestial body flows silently and effortlessly in its own elliptical orbit. So it tells us, the Quran says that every celestial body has an orbit and moves. No theory again is going to contradict this, that celestial bodies are stationary. The third problem we have is that scientists lack scientific insight. If you have a word that's scientific in nature, they don't translate properly. So when the atheists point the error, they cannot respond to them. And then the only argument is that it's not a scientific document. It's more for spiritual moral development. Let me just give you an example. In chapter 71:15, this is the traditional translation. It says, He created 7 heavens, and in each heaven possessing a sun and a moon. Now, this is completely cockeyed description of the universe. Now, I've given the correct translation in my previous lecture, so you may consult them. Let me just give it to you. It says, this is the correct translation. Now, see the difference. It's you who created multiple solar systems consisting of orbits or layers, one upon the other, and have created them in stages, and have set up at each one of them a sun that generates light and a moon that reflects light. You see the difference. Now, the Quran also uses science as a powerful intellectual tool to prove its futuristic knowledge. For example, it describes the 5 stages of embryogenesis, and this has only been established in the 20th century. So, in other words, what the Quran is saying is there's lots of information in the Quran, futuristic knowledge, which will be in the future be authenticated. Verse 41:53 says, we will show them our signs in the universe and within themselves that this Quran is the truth. In other words, as technology develops, these statements made by the Quran in the 7th century will be demonstrated or shown to be true, and this is happening all the time. Now, science can also be used to support metaphysical concepts. For example, life after death. I mean, how do you prove life after death? This is how the Quran responds. We said earlier that, the statements made by the Quran, hundreds of these futuristic statements, all been shown to be correct. Not a single error has been detected. So the information in the Quran is therefore reliable, absolutely reliable and truthful. So if the author of the Quran makes a statement, it must be taken seriously. So if it says there's going to be life after death, you are almost compelled to accept it. And the second tool he uses to, provide the logical basis for life after death is based on evolution. The entire evolutionary process is stated in the Quran. From the chemicals of the earth, life evolved. In 4067, this is stated there. And in 3020, emergence of the first cell, stated in 7189. the emergence of multicellular organisms. In 2445, early human ancestors in 76.2, and finally Homo sapiens in 10 verse 19. So this is an astonishing process, various transformations, the chemicals of the earth to conscious beings. All these stages taking place over hundreds of thousands of years. And then the Qur'an takes up the human story again in the embryo, where again we pass through stages. And then you are born, and the pattern of stages continue. Now we ask ourselves, when you die, is this the end of everything? It just seems so abrupt, so unnatural. If death means final extinction, it is the saddest and most tragic story we can think of. That the mystery of existence will remain unexplained. Life will have no purpose, will have no hope. And the big questions won't be answered. And as I said, it's just doom and gloom. Or do you prefer a life where when you die, the journey, this evolutionary journey continues on a higher level, where you acquire knowledge, not with effort as in this world, but sort of spontaneously sweet knowledge, and where God says any lurking injury will be removed from you. Boredom and fatigue won't affect you. This will be total bliss. So you take your pick. So it seems more logical, that life should continue rather than end. Would death ultimately spell the end of our physical existence? Now, this important subject of life after death, providing a logical basis for it, is discussed in another lecture which you may refer to.